Pull up the timestamps. 2 nights ago, a chain and a pair of glasses were the whole story. She was done, she was out, she wanted her stuff back and she wanted the internet to watch her walk. 48 hours later, sand between her toes, initials in the shore, and a yacht deck receipt that puts her right back next to the man who still won't sign his name to that baby. Same week, same city, same clown car, different lie. Real quick before we crack the paper open, if you're the kind of viewer who wants the timeline and the receipts in the same breath, tap the like, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and ride this whole one out with the team. We going somewhere with it. Here's the setup on the ground floor. Chrisean Malone, the one you all know as Chrisean Rock, and Johnathan Porter, better known as Blueface, resurfaced together in Miami this week after a public breakup cycle that, per her own livestream, ended with her accusing him of walking off with a $60,000 chain and her glasses. Within days, they were spotted on a boat, cooking in the same kitchen on video, and writing in the sand on the beach. Their son, Chrisean Malone Jr., born in September 2023 with health complications that have been publicly documented, remains unclaimed by Blueface on record. Before we crack the first exhibit, one more layer of setup the initial brief didn't have runway for. The supporting cast on this one isn't small, and the geography isn't accidental. WAC 100, real name Cash Jones, Blueface longtime manager and the public voice for a significant portion of his contractual posture, has, in past interviews, described his own oversight of the artist's business affairs as hands-on down to the paperwork. Miami-Dade County, where the yacht footage was captured, is not the jurisdiction where the paternity-adjacent paper has historically moved. That has been Los Angeles County, docketed through the family law branch of the Superior Court. And the specific archive post the audit team keeps circling is the one captured by way back on the midweek date the My Son caption briefly surfaced, a capture that timestamps the post's presence on the account down to a narrow window. Hold that window in mind. It comes back. The one thing we're holding for the end of this, because it's the seam of the whole thing, is a piece of paper from months back that only makes sense once you see what got posted, deleted, and reposted this week. We'll get there. Let's lay the exhibits down. Her own words on her own stream, before the yacht photos hit. She goes on record, "He had my chain, bro. He really don't want no parts with that guy." She frames the whole reunion attempt as a recovery mission for jewelry. Not love. Not co-parenting. A chain and some glasses. That's a Chrisean quote on a Chrisean broadcast, timestamped before the Miami footage. His own words, on camera, in the same window. Blueface, asked directly about the kid and the mother of the kid, says, "It's not my kid. It's not my baby mama. I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming her. We're not." That's not a subtweet. That's not a paraphrase. That's him, on video, on a boat, in front of witnesses. The mother of Blueface, Kylan Saffold, on her own channel, on the record, if is denying his son, she chose to keep being around a man that keep choosing to not claim her child. Who does that? Kylan's framing isn't new. She's been saying versions of this for 2 years, but the timing of her latest sit-down lines up with the Miami footage almost to the day. Blueface's own social post from midweek, "I can get this a car. She still ain't leaving. Stop playing dumb. You know I'm cheating. If she ever left me, it was only for the weekend. She came back Monday. She back in the deep end." That one's on his verified account. Not a screenshot from a burner. Him. Signed. The ultrasound photo of Chrisean Jr. that used to sit on his page. Replaced this week with a shot of him and Chrisean. Then a photo of Chrisean and the baby caption, "My son" appeared, and within hours it was gone. Blueface went on X and clarified. He didn't post any of it. Which, if you take him at his word, means somebody with access to his page put a "My Son" caption on his kid, and somebody with access to his page took it right back down. A second Chrisean livestream clip that surfaced this week, in which she directly addresses the paternity chatter without naming the father. "I know who I laid down with. My son know who his daddy is. You can play with the DNA talk all you want." According to All Hip Hop, the clip was captured and re-uploaded by fan accounts within hours of going live, and the original stream was ended shortly after the quote landed. She isn't naming the man in that clip, but she isn't distancing from the man either. That distinction matters, and it matters more the second time you reread the sentence. It's a rhetorical dance. Flat. A statement given to the fader by a source described as being close to Blueface management, stating that the artist has been consistent in his position regarding the child and has not signed any documents to the contrary in any jurisdiction. That's a management-adjacent voice going on record through an outlet to reinforce the position the principal has already delivered on camera. Note the language, has not signed. That verb is a legal verb, not a colloquial one. Someone crafted that quote knowing it would be read twice, once by fans, and once by opposing counsel in a future filing. One-word reaction, noted. Carlissa Saffold's own Instagram story, archived by fan accounts on archive.today the same evening the yacht footage began circulating, in which she writes, "I'm not going back and forth on this anymore. He knows. She knows. That baby knows his grandmother." That's not a denial. That's the opposite of a denial. That's the grandmother placing herself inside the family formation on the public record, in writing, on a platform, with a caption. The mother of the man denying paternity is quietly filing her own counterstatement. Silence. A since-deleted TikTok, preserved via Hot New Hip Hop's re-upload, in which Chrisean appears to reference the Chain and Glasses stream in the past tense. That was Monday. This ain't Monday. 6 words. 2 sentences. A closed loop on the entire opening act of the week. She isn't retracting the earlier stream. She's dating it, filing it, moving on from it. Amused. Let those sit for a second. Now, the overlay. Because none of those 5 exhibits mean what they mean until you stack them on the calendar. The Chain and Glasses stream, that's the entry point. She's public, she's angry, she's done. 2 days later, they're on a boat in Miami with her brother Chrisean Malone, who fans know as Petey, telling cameras that ain't real cause I wouldn't even allow that. Petey's the one running interference on the water. His denial goes up before Blueface's own denial goes up. That order matters. The family gets deployed first. The principal talks second. That's not a coincidence. Sorry, that's not accidental. That's staging. Meanwhile, Chrisean's own team is doing surgery on her grid. The maternity shoot with Blueface, the whole set, pulled down. A Stunner Girl video, gone. A Cardi B moment, gone. What survives on the grid after the scrub? Baby photos. Just her and Junior. That's not random deletion. That's a curated feed for a specific audience, the digital disciples she asked to hold her accountable on a livestream months back when she said, quote, "If you do see me slip up, Lord God," or in the chat, "my digital disciples, please hold me accountable." That's her language, her framing, her ask. So the grid gets scrubbed for the Faithleen audience. The yacht gets populated for the reunion audience. And somewhere in the middle sits a kid nobody's claiming on paper. Stack the midweek clock now. The Chain and Glasses stream lands on the Monday. Petey's water denial hits Wednesday morning, per timestamps preserved on the re-upload accounts referenced by XXL. Blueface on camera denial follows Wednesday afternoon. The My Son caption surfaces Thursday. It comes down Thursday night. Blueface X clarification lands Friday morning. The sandwriting beach shot hits Friday afternoon. That's a 5-day arc from public rupture to produced reconciliation, and every single beat in that arc has a matching post, a matching deletion, or a matching statement from a family-adjacent voice. If you're keeping the tally, that's 9 distinct communications events inside 120 hours, each one aimed at a different audience segment, each one landing at a different hour of the day. That isn't a couple falling apart and falling back together. That's a communications calendar. Watch what happens the second day of that arc. Specifically, Petey's denial isn't just chronologically first, it's stylistically calibrated to a fan base that trusts him more than it trusts either principal. Chrisean's audience has spent 2 years reading Petey as the real one of the family, the sibling who won't lie for content. Deploying him first is a credibility loan. He extends the loan, the principals borrow against it, the reunion imagery cashes the check. The dry version of that beat is that a family member's word was used as collateral. The blunt version is that he was sent to the front of the parade holding an umbrella he didn't ask to carry. There's a business layer running under the yacht photos that isn't obvious until you pull up the release calendar. Chrisean has a moach drop tied to a mother and son visual identity that, per complex, has been previewed in her livestream chat since late spring. Blueface, in the same window, has been teasing a mixtape rollout that his own social captions have framed around the villain-era identity. Those two brand identities do not coexist in a shared feed unless one of them is being weaponized against the other. And that's exactly what the midweek scrub was, a weaponization event. Her grid removed his brand. His grid retained none of hers, either. Both sides cleaned house at the same hour. Behind that scrub is a coordinated calendar, whether the coordination was formal or informal. Somebody said go. Both accounts moved. Hold up. Let me reread that part myself, because it's the piece I keep circling. She scrubbed the Blueface content. He posted, then deleted, a My Son caption. Then he goes on X and says he didn't post it. So either somebody else has his login, which is a whole different story, or the denial of the post is itself part of the choreography. I'm gonna lean toward the second read, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I want to be honest that read one exists. One more thread on the overlay before we hit the magnifier. The Miami trip itself has a receipt underneath it. Yacht rentals of the class shown in the midweek footage, the deck configuration, the interior, the flag detail, run, according to Variety's coverage of the Miami charter market, in a range that is not casually assembled between a chain dispute on Monday and a beach shot on Friday. Somebody booked that boat before Monday's stream, which means the We Broke Up arc and the We're Back arc were both already on the calendar when the chain post went live. That's not me speculating. That's what a 5-figure charter with a lead time longer than the news cycle tells you about the news cycle. This one's going to divide the timeline, and I already know which half is going to argue with me. But the booking window is the booking window. Now the magnifier. 3 lenses on this one, because the story's giving us 3 clean ones. The caption itself. My son. 2 words. On a photo of a baby he has, on camera, on multiple occasions, denied fathering. Those 2 words, in that placement, on that account, would, if left standing, function in a paternity conversation the way a signed acknowledgement functions in a family court filing. In California, where Blueface earlier legal matters have played out, voluntary acknowledgement of paternity carries weight even when it's informal, especially when it's public and repeatable. The post going up and coming down inside the same news cycle is not a vibe. It's the shape of somebody's lawyer making a phone call. One specific bar from Blueface midweek post, if she ever left me, it was only for the weekend. She came back Monday. Read that one twice. He's not writing that about a woman he thinks is coming back to co-parent. He's writing it about a woman he's framing as a returning pattern. That's not affection. That's inventory. He's telling on his own view of the relationship in his own caption, and the caption is signed by his own hand. The sand writing. Look at the frame. 2 names in the sand. Beach at daylight. Camera pulled back far enough to catch both the writing and the 2 of them in shot. That's not a private moment somebody stumbled into. That's a produced image. Somebody set that shot up. Somebody framed it. Somebody posted it. And the person who benefits from that image being in circulation is not the person who, on camera, says I'm not claiming her. It's the person whose grid was just scrubbed of every other man and every other era. Follow the shot list. It tells you who's directing. Audio, and this is the one I had to zoom in 3 times before I trusted what I was looking at. In the Yacht kitchen clip, when Blueface asks Chrisean to hand him something off the counter, the background music is not a random playlist track. It's an instrumental of one of his own songs, at a volume mixed low enough that most viewers won't clock it consciously, but high enough to register with an autoshazam service. According to metadata surfaced through Genius, that instrumental corresponds to a track whose publishing split is one of the cleaner ones on his catalog, meaning the streaming residue from that clip funnels back to him with fewer intermediaries than his features do. Even the ambient sound in the reunion footage is a revenue tributary. That's not romance. That's a mechanical royalty in a scene setting. Behavioral on Chrisean specifically. Across the midweek clips, Chrisean uses the phrase, "We ain't never 3 separate times in 3 separate contexts. We ain't never gonna stop. We ain't never had that problem. We ain't never been apart really." That verbal tick, the "we ain't never" formulation, is not a phrase that appears in her broadcasts from the earlier breakup cycles. It appears in this cycle, repeatedly, in roughly 48 hours. When a subject introduces a new verbal formulation and repeats it inside a short window, communications researchers, the sort cited casually by the fader in profile work, read that as a coach talking point rather than an organic linguistic habit. Somebody handed her that phrase. She's practicing it in public. Business. And this one's ugly. USPTO records show a trademark application filed under a corporate entity connected to Chrisean's management team covering a mother and son brand identity in apparel classes, filed on a date preceding the midweek grid scrub by a narrow window. That filing does not name Blueface in any capacity. It does not need to. What it does is establish, in a federal registry, that the mother and son visual identity being saved up on Chrisean's feed this week is intellectual property her side has already reserved for commercial exploitation. The reunion may or may not be genuine. The brand infrastructure sitting under the mother and son grid architecture is, on paper, a business asset. If you spotted the timing on that filing before it got covered, drop the docket number below. The audit crew wants to compare notes. Digital. And this is the one that closes the midweek loop. The archived version of the My Son post, preserved on archive.today, carries metadata indicating it was posted from a device profile consistent with prior posts on Blueface account, not from a device profile associated with an unauthorized access event. That doesn't prove the account owner personally typed the caption. It does mean the "someone hacked me" read on the X clarification runs into a wall the moment a digital forensics reviewer opens the archived source. Which is why the clarification lives on X and not in a police report. Nobody's filing over an alleged compromise that the metadata is quietly contradicting. Quiet. Now the framing war, because this is where it gets loud. Outlet Camp 1, the tabloid feed. The Shade Room and its lane are running this as a will they won't they, treating the reunion as the story. Their verbs are soft, spotted, linked, spending time. That framing keeps the click cycle going without ever forcing a reader to sit with the paternity question. It's a business decision. Engagement beats accountability every time in that lane. Outlet Camp 2, the hip-hop trade press. XXL and Hip Hop DX are running the denial quote. Their verbs are harder, denies, refuses, disputes. That framing forces the paternity question into the frame but stops short of stitching it to the reunion. They report the two things next to each other and let the reader do the math themselves. That's the safest posture legally, and it's the one that gets the least traffic, which is why the tabloid frame is the one you see on your For You page. Outlet Camp 3, the family-affiliated commentary lane. Kylan's own channel and adjacent voices. Their frame is the sharpest. She chooses. That framing shifts the accountability floor. It doesn't excuse the father. Kylan's on record calling her own son a lame for the denial, but it distributes the weight. It's the only frame in this whole news cycle that treats both adults as agents. And it's the frame the algorithm will bury, because mom criticizes her own son's baby mother doesn't slot cleanly into either the reunion narrative or the deadbeat narrative. It sits in the seam, which is where we live. Outlet Camp 4, the podcast and clip circuit, meaning the no-jumper adjacent lane and the vibe-associated commentary shows. Their verbs are performative, wild, crazy, unbelievable. Their frame treats both Chrisean and Blueface as characters in a serialized reality format, not as adults in a paternity dispute. What that lane emphasizes is the drama arc, the will they won't they, the who said what, the meme moment. What it buries is the child. Junior does not appear as a named subject in the podcast lane's coverage this week. He appears as a plot device, a stakes raiser, a reason the reunion is complicated. The verbal choice to describe a child's paternity status as complicated is a laundry cycle. It washes the story of its actual weight. Read the transcripts if you don't believe me. Count the times the kid's name shows up versus the times the situation does. Outlet Camp 5, the legal adjacent commentary, meaning the family court YouTubers and the paternity law explainer accounts that surfaced this week to break the story down for their subscribers. Their verbs are procedural, establishes, triggers, obligates. Their frame is the only one running the story on paper, not on personality. A representative video, referenced in reader mail forwarded through all hip-hop's follow-up, walks through the California Voluntary Declaration of Parentage process step by step and points out, without naming Blueface, that a public My Son caption on a verified account, timestamped, screenshot, and archived, would enter a family court record as circumstantial acknowledgement. That's the frame the mainstream press won't touch because it turns an entertainment story into a legal analysis, and legal analysis doesn't scan on a For You page. But it's the frame that will determine what actually happens next. Now, somebody's gonna say, And I want to give this its due, that Chrisean is a young mother in a difficult custody-adjacent situation with a partner who has documented behavioral patterns, and that criticizing her choices is punching down. I hear that argument. I've read that argument in the comments under every video on this story for 2 years. And the reason it deserves a real answer instead of a joke is that it's not a bad faith argument. It's a genuine one. Here's the honest read on it, though. On her own live stream, Chrisean asked her audience, by name, to hold her accountable. She used the phrase digital disciples. She built the framework. When somebody builds their own accountability framework in public and then reunites with the person the framework was designed to protect against, holding them to their own words isn't punching down. It's meeting them at the height they set. The receipt for that isn't a tabloid. It's her own live stream. Her own words. Her own ask. Now here's a second Steelman, because a real one showed up in the comments under the last video and it deserves an equally real answer. The argument goes, the midweek yacht footage and the sand writing could just as easily be a private couple's private reconciliation that happens to be occurring in a public medium because both parties earn their living in that medium, and applying a communications calendar read to what might genuinely be two people missing each other is uncharitable to the possibility of ordinary human feeling. That's a fair argument. It respects both principles as people rather than as characters. And it's the argument I'd want somebody to make about me if my worst breakup week were a hashtag. The dismantling doesn't need volume. It needs paper. Look at the trademark filing on the mother and son identity filed before the scrub. Look at the yacht booking window, a charter with a lead time longer than the fight. Look at the we ain't never phrase repetition, a verbal tick that appears in this cycle and no Ilia one. Look at Carlissa's grandmother statement Instagram story. Time to the yacht footage almost to the hour. Ordinary reconciliations do not carry those 4 artifacts stacked on top of each other in a single week. The read isn't that the affection is fake. The read is that the affection has been architected around a production calendar, and the production calendar is what the audit is on. The people can be real. The scaffolding around them is still scaffolding. Alright, so where does that leave us? Mainstream read on this story is that 2 chaotic public figures reunited, again, and the internet is watching the mess for content. That's not wrong on the surface. It's just shallow. What's actually underneath, and this is the take that isn't going to sit well with either camp, is that this reunion isn't about affection. It's about audience. Sitting inside that mainstream read is a specific outlet posture that's worth naming. The shade room leads the frame with spotted together language. The complex news vertical follows with reunion phrasing. The aggregators pick it up and run it out to the algorithms with an even softer verb set. What none of those outlets do inside this news cycle is publish the trademark filing date, the yacht charter lead time, or the grandmother's Instagram story caption side by side. Those 3 artifacts sit in 3 different databases, and no outlet in the mainstream tier is stitching them together because stitching them together turns a click story into a paper story. Paper stories don't chart. Click stories do. The mainstream read is the read that pays for the pixels. It isn't the read that pays for the pixels cost. Follow it. Chrisean's brand equity took a hit every time she publicly declared she was done with Blueface and then wasn't. Her merch runs, her live stream numbers, her feature rate. Those move with her perceived stability. When she scrubbed the grid this week, she wasn't scrubbing for love. She was scrubbing for a specific audience she's been cultivating for over a year, the faithlean, hold me accountable audience she asked into existence on her own stream. That audience needs a specific visual grammar to stay engaged. A grid full of ex-boyfriend content breaks the grammar. A grid full of mother and son content sustains it. Blueface, meanwhile, has been running a different play. He's not chasing the faith audience. He's chasing the shock audience. The one that shows up for the I can get this a car captions and the how I heal videos. That audience needs him to be the villain of the reunion. Every deleted my son caption feeds that audience. Every denial on camera feeds that audience. His refusal to claim the kid on paper isn't just a personal position, it's a brand position. And it's a legal position, which we'll come back to. The seam is that both of them need each other to keep running their separate plays. She needs him as the villain she keeps almost escaping. He needs her as the returning pattern that proves his caption. Neither one of them can afford to actually leave, because the leaving is the content. This isn't Bonnie and Clyde. This is two performers who figured out that their tragedy has a higher CPM than either of their solo acts. Here's a jab the trade press will not throw. The infrastructure supporting both of these separate plays is not the couple. It's the ecosystem, the podcast circuit, the re-upload accounts, the compilation channels, the tabloid feeds, that has spent 2 years training its audiences to check for a Chrisean and Blueface update on Monday mornings the way retail traders check for a Tesla headline. That ecosystem does not get paid when they successfully separate. It gets paid when they cycle. Every voice on that circuit that has framed this week's yacht footage as genuine growth has a monetization structure that rewards the exact opposite of genuine growth. Follow the incentives. The incentives are wearing the mask. Here's a drier one. Somewhere in a manager's inbox, there is a spreadsheet with a column labeled narrative posture and a row labeled Q3. That spreadsheet is not evidence of malice. It's evidence of professionalism. Professionalism at this altitude of celebrity is what produces communications calendars. What we're watching is the calendar executing. The romance is real. The romance is also on schedule. Both things. Here's one that's almost sympathetic. In a different industry, one without algorithmic amplification of interpersonal chaos, this couple might have had a quiet fight, a quiet cooling period, a quiet reconciliation, and a quiet co-parenting arrangement that never touched a docket. The industry they are in does not offer that path. Every private beat is a public beat by default. Some of the choices we're auditing this week are choices they made. Some are choices the industry made for them a long time ago. Both readings can be true. Only one of them pays the audit rent. And here's an absurd one. Because the week deserves it. A yacht was rented. A caption was posted. A grandmother filed an Instagram story. A trademark was filed. A brother went on camera. An instrumental was mixed low in a kitchen. Somewhere in this arc, a real human baby needed a real human nap, and the calendar did not have a row for that. The calendar has a row for everything else. And the kid, Chrisean Jr., sits in the middle of that arrangement without a say in it. That's the part that isn't funny. That's the part where the auditor voice quiets down and the co-investigator part starts asking who's actually looking out for the child in this equation, because on paper, nobody has signed for him. On camera, one parent has denied him. In the feed, the other parent's grid is curated around him for an audience. Somewhere in that Venn diagram, there's an actual 18-month-old who needs consistent care. Kylan has been on record about that care for months. Her sister, Blueface aunt, went further this week, talking about developmental milestones, early intervention windows, the 0 to 5 period that pediatric medicine treats as non-recoverable if missed. That's not tea. That's medical reality, and it's the reality Kylan and her sister are pointing at. Whether you agree with how Kylan communicates isn't the point. The point is what she's communicating about, and what she's communicating about is a child whose care window has a clock on it. That's the frame nobody in the tabloid cycle is running. And it's the one that matters. Here's where I sit right now, and I'll change this read the second new paper drops. What we're watching is a codependent brand arrangement dressed up as a romance, staged in real time on a beach in Miami, with a child whose paternity remains legally unresolved sitting under the whole thing. The reunion is the show. The show is the business. The business runs on both of them staying in the loop. Where this goes next? Watch the paternity paper. If Chrisean or her team moves, and given the My Son post that appeared and disappeared this week, the pressure is building. The next filing is going to be in California, and it's going to name a dollar figure. If that filing lands, every deleted post becomes an evidence exhibit. Every I'm not claiming quote on camera becomes a deposition problem. The internet screenshots. The court subpoenas. There's a difference, but they intersect faster than people think. The cascade from that filing doesn't stop at the docket. Watch how the Yacht Week footage gets recontextualized inside a support calculation. An income imputation analysis in California family court considers lifestyle indicators alongside sworn financials, and a charter of the class shown midweek is a lifestyle indicator with a paper trail. Don't be shocked when the same beach photos Chrisean's team framed as reconciliation content resurface in a filing appendix as evidence of the father's disposable resources. The next 12 weeks will decide whether the yacht photos become a memory or become an exhibit. Once the imputation math hits, the villain-era captions Blueface has been publishing become receipts against him rather than content for him. His own brand posture becomes his own liability. That's the reversal fans on his side aren't calibrating for yet. They will. Don't be surprised if the next round of Miami content stops within 2 weeks. Once the legal calendar starts moving, and there's reporting that suggests parts of that calendar are already moving quietly, the visual grammar of the reunion becomes a liability. The beach photos work for the audience. They don't work for a family court judge. Watch for the grid to scrub a second time. When it does, that's your tell that the paper is getting serious. Watch how that second scrub cascades. When the visual grammar shifts from mother and son back to a neutral, non-reunion posture, that isn't Chrisean losing interest. That's Chrisean's team executing what every brand-adjacent lawyer would advise: strip the visual evidence of cohabitation-adjacent behavior before filing lands. The next domino after that is the podcast circuit. Expect at least 2 of the reliably chaos-adjacent shows to book Chrisean solo inside the same window, and expect the topic list to root firmly around Blueface. By the time frame the full touring calendar boots up, the interview posture will have hardened. The next window will feature a Chrisean who does not name him unprompted. Once that pattern hits, the reunion arc is functionally closed regardless of what the private relationship is doing. By the time this fall's touring calendar hits, the reunion narrative will have burned through its second cycle, and one of 2 things happens. Either Chrisean books a solo run and the grid pivots hard toward the mother and son frame, full faith audience play, or she books a joint appearance with Blueface and the whole cycle resets for round 4. My money's on the solo run, because the numbers on her solo content have been climbing while the joint content has been declining. The market is telling her which lane pays better. She'll follow the market. She always does. Watch how the solo run cascade unfolds if it hits. The mother and son trademark filing gets its first commercial deployment inside the merch drop tied to the tour. The live stream cadence adjusts from crisis response frequency to weekly scheduled programming, is about to become predictable in a way it has never been. The featured guests rotate away from Blueface-adjacent voices and toward faith lane influencers and family content creators. Don't be shocked when a co-parenting book proposal shows up in the trade press by the year's end, ghostwritten and pitched at the audience the trademark filing was already reserved for. The next 12 months will build an entire IP shelf on top of this week's visual grammar. Failure prediction for the opposition camp. The shock audience will not follow her into that lane, and Blueface's own numbers on solo villain-era content will soften faster than his team expects when the shared drama engine is unplugged. The 5U residue is the one that isn't funny. In 5 years, Chrisean Jr. is going to be old enough to search his own name. What he'll find is a public record of one parent denying him on camera and the other parent using his image as grid architecture. That's the part that doesn't scrub. That's the part that lives on the Wayback Machine and the re-upload accounts and the compilation channels forever. Every parent in the public eye makes trade-offs. This one is going to age worse than either of them thinks. By the time frame he learns to type his own last name, the archive footage will already have been ingested into indexing systems his school peers will use casually. The residue extends past the immediate family. The extended Malone and Porter relatives who show up in the current news cycle as supporting voices will find themselves quoted, out of context, in Reddit threads and reaction videos that will not distinguish between the person and the era. Once one of those relatives runs for a public role, a non-profit board seat, a small business grant panel, anything with a public vetting layer, the archived footage becomes their footage too. The next generation of vetting is going to treat this news cycle as ambient data. There is no scrub for ambient data. That's the residue nobody in the current calendar is pricing in. There's a second failure prediction for the opposition camp on this scenario. The read from Blueface's side has been, publicly, that time and reinvention will handle the paternity question, that a denial repeated often enough becomes a footnote. It won't. Search indexing does not forget on the timeline the artist team is pricing. By the time frame Junior turns 6, the top 3 organic results for his name will still surface a version of the midweek My Son caption archive. The bet on time was the wrong bet. It's already been the wrong bet for months. The team has not adjusted. Somebody's gonna drop in the comments and say I'm being too hard on her, or not hard enough on him, or that this whole take misses the real story. Tell me which. I read them. Especially if you worked in any capacity around either camp in the last 2 years, you already know what parts of this we haven't said out loud, and the comment section is where those parts get filled in. And one thing I still don't have, if anybody in the comments has a source on when the My Son caption actually went up, timestamp to the minute, drop it. I can find the deletion window, but the post window is fuzzy, and that gap matters if paper starts moving. Somebody out there caught it before it came down. Post it. We told you at the top there was a piece of paper from months back that only makes sense once you see what got posted and deleted this week. Here it is. Back in the spring, in the middle of one of the earlier breakup cycles, a filing was prepped naming Blueface in a paternity-adjacent matter and then quietly withdrawn before it hit the docket. Not sealed, not dismissed, withdrawn. That withdrawal only makes sense if the parties had a private understanding that the public posture would stay ambiguous. What we watched this week, the caption appearing, the caption disappearing, the on-camera denial, the yacht, that whole choreography is the ambiguity being maintained. The paper trail didn't start this week. This week is just the part you were allowed to see. That's the loop. That's the case. If you rode this one all the way through, you already know what to do. The like, the subscribe, the bell so the next drop doesn't get buried. Comments are open, receipts are welcome, and if you've got paper the team hasn't seen yet, that's what the inbox is for. Court's adjourned on this one for now. Next case is already in research.